He is an actor rapidly approaching 100 projects over his impressive 30-plus year career, appearing in films such as Malcom X, Operation Dumbo Drop, The Birdcage, Independence Day, Desperate Measures, Matchstick Men, 7 Pounds, and Inception.
He has also been in TV shows such as Star Trek, The Next Generation, and Voyager, and Enterprise, Judging Amy, Charmed, ER, NYPD Blue, 6 Feet Under,
Yes.
The West Wing, 24, American Dad. One of my favorites, all 23 seasons, Supernatural, for me personally, not him, and The Night Agent.
And that is just barely scratching the surface. Not to mention, he was the voice of our favorite Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in TMNT 3, and Raphael, by the way, if you don't know who our favorite is. And the film that brings us together today, The Negotiator, in which he played Argento.
Now, he also, if they did not know, he also is a writer, director, deacon, and so much more. Tim Kelleher, first and foremost, we're fans. And let's say that first and number two, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with TTFT today.
Thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And why?
You know, man, I mean, it's sweet. We needed something. I'm messing with you. No, man, we're fans, man. You know, I still got you on VHS, not to date you or anything like that. I got you way back then. I've been a fan, man.
Oh, that's really kind. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's really odd. This is the second interview in less than a week where somebody wanted to talk about The Negotiator. Is there an anniversary coming up or something? I don't know.
No,
I mean, it could come out in August, but we're definitely in an odd year for it.
I mean,
okay.
The universe just works like that.
Yeah.
It's a classic, man. It's still a classic.
Okay, so we're going to start all the way at the beginning. You played football in high school at Monsignor Farrell High School, and after college, you entered the Maryland province of the Society of Jesus, where you completed the novitiate. Am I saying that correctly?
The novitiate. Yeah, I didn't. I completed it, but I didn't take vows, so I left just before my classmates took vows.
Okay, thank you for the segue. And you left to return to New York, where you began training as a stage actor. And
Yeah.
I watched an interview with you. I thought it was funny how you said you on The World Over, you said you did the most important thing in your life, and you followed that up with what you thought the silliest thing was. And I was just curious if that was really all that was in that decision-making process, or if acting was on your radar at all to begin with.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of a glib way of the way I will often put it. But there is a lot to it. But to your question, when I was growing up, I was kind of a stooge. I would fool around, do a lot of imitations, and get in trouble all the time. And friends and teachers would say, you should be in comedy, you should be an actor or something like that. And in my mind, I was like, oh, that's kind of flattering, because some of my biggest heroes were like Jerry Lewis and the Bowery Boys and Bob Hope and that kind of stuff. But in the back of my mind also was like, but that's no way for a grown up to live their life, and running concurrently with that was a sense from early on that I had some sort of vocation, religious vocation. So when it came time to really make an adult decision, I went with the Jesuits, and when that went really well, but I felt like I wasn't ready to make that kind of commitment yet. I was just a little too emotionally immature. So when I left, I had taken one theater course in the entire time I was in college, and it was with a woman. She was terrific, and she had been on Broadway. She studied with Strasberg and some of the great teachers, Stella Adler. And I said to her, Irene, listen, I'm doing something new. I'm considering going to acting school. Do you think I have any business at all going to New York, or should I start out somewhere more modest? And she said, no, you should go right to New York, and I'll give you 3 names and numbers to call. So that's what began that. And then when I finally settled down, I went to a couple of different places. And when I finally found the teacher that I really committed to, it was like a 3-year program. And that opened doors that actually allowed me to connect the art and the religion in a way that I hadn't really considered. He was a phenomenal teacher, and so that's kind
amazing. Now,
You are fantastic with the segues because that
Yeah,
leads
that you. I mean, it's like
perfectly.
you led us right to where we were going. See,
Oh,
But
This
actually,
guy's-
I'm gonna burn the bridge real quick
We're almost
to that
done.
segue because I did want to ask if you have because I thought that was funny how you said it was silly. You looked at it as kind of silly because I have that feeling sometimes too when I watch grown actors, like somebody like Vin Diesel is essentially doing what little boys do in their backyard for free. He just figured out a way to monetize it, especially action stars. You know, it just it's. But you know, adults in general playing pretend is kind of a silly concept.
Hey, let me
when
tell you
really
something. If it wasn't for us, people like me and him, you wouldn't have anything to write about.
That's
Big boy.
right.
This guy over here, man.
My
It may
follow-up
be
that I
silly, but it's good work if you can get it.
Yeah.
well, that's kind of where I was going with it. Is if you still feel that silliness being on the other side of the camera, or you know, if you just kind of embrace it, if figure out a way to work with it.
Well, I certainly would write it off as just silly from beginning to end. And you know, when you actually write things and produce things and direct things, you can actually have a say over the kind of material you do. And I like to, whatever it is, you know, it's not going to be like the Wayans brothers, like, you know, message, you know.
Ow.
Remember that movie?
Yeah, I do. He does it. Extra cool points.
What movie
Right.
is that?
But
You kidding me? Don't be a Mrs. South Sister while you're
Oh,
just in the hood.
that's right. So, you know, it's, you know, for me, like if you're going to combine religion, be presumptuous enough to try and wed the two. I mean, my model for that is Flannery O'Connor, you know, who was a wildly imaginative, you know, crazy good writer, writing about religious things, but in really extreme ways that are just like sometimes shocking. Not that I want to shock. I mean, I I wrote and directed a sitcom pilot, which is about something serious, but the three leads in the show are complete knuckleheads from the neighborhood, stumbling into the mysteries of existence.
Amazing.
That's interesting. When did you do that?
Oh, it's been a few years now. It's got Nestor Serrano,
Okay,
Casey
we'll get to him.
Shimashko, and it's got a good cast. I mean, Amy Schumer's in it.
Nice.
I want to dial back to something you said earlier because I thought it was very important.
Before I burn the segue bridge.
No, it's okay. I was going to bring it back around. I'm a bridge builder. You burn them, I build them. All right. With that being said, now you spoke about, of course, now you asked someone, you know, do you think you have the talent, and then you of course moved to New York. But one of the things I heard you speak on, which I love to hear, was that your talent itself, I guess you feel it wasn't enough. And when you got with Robert Pattinson, of course, rest in peace, who passed away in 2019, Robert Pattinson, you studied under him. And if anyone does a quick search about him, they know how intense, and he's such a stern coach. So I wanted to ask you personally, what was that experience like working with him? And then, as you mentioned, the merging of the talent with the art. What was that like?
Well, the study with Robert Pattinson was a formative experience. I remember hearing Robert Duvall talk about Sanford Meisner studying under him. He said it was easier to go to Korea in the war than it was to study under Meisner. And I think you could say that about Pattinson, only maybe exponentially 10 times. It was like one of the most intense things I've ever done.
Is it like whiplash? He's like the acting whiplash.
Well, when I first heard about him, somebody said, you know, if you really want to learn how to act, you have to go to this guy. And I was like, oh, another acting teacher guru? This is what I need. And she's like, well, you can either go or you don't go. It's up to you. I don't care. So I went in with kind of a chip on my shoulder and like, you know, he's going to be one of these guys, going to be Svengali, and I'm going to, you know, call him on his nonsense. But I mean, there was an element of intimidation, but there was no nonsense. I mean, this guy knew what he was doing. He was a master, and it wasn't just about acting. I mean, he would have us go to ballets, classical concerts, Frida Kahlo, museum exhibits. I had a friend who was in my class, and he had never gone to college. I had been to college in some grad school, and I said to him, I'm telling you, if you do this course that he's telling you to do, and you do even half the things that he's telling us to do, you walk out of there with something better than the equivalent of a master's degree from a good university. And it was true. I mean, and it was all to kind of a practical purpose about, you know, developing this aesthetic sensibility, because he said, you know, I'm not teaching you to go out and do, you know, some goofy sitcom. I'm teaching you how to do Shakespeare and Oscar Wilde, and it's great if you can make a living doing sitcoms, but I'm training you to do the real thing.
Yeah.
That's
So,
intense. Very
well,
intense.
okay. Well, we'll get into like I'm curious how long you were doing what he considered the real thing, you know, stage acting and things like that before you got into your first role, which I always say according to IMDb because
They're about shooting about
70-30
84%
for
maybe.
accuracy. But according to IMDb, your first role was 1989's Graveyard Shift 2, which was shot around the late summer, early fall of 1988. So how like what was your journey like from getting into acting, training, doing the stage? I'm assuming some commercials probably before your first film role.
Well, I didn't have an agent. I didn't have a clue really. When we finished class, myself and an actor named Ralph Waite, the nephew of the Paul Walton Waite, we started a theater company, and we built our company from the ground up, and we moved to spaces, and then we finally got a permanent space that was every bit as impressive as, you know, Circle and the Square and some of the, you know, the big off-Broadway rep companies. And I was the artistic director, and I, you know, that's how I got into directing, because the first thing we ever did was a play that I adapted from a short story by Tolstoy. And I didn't know any directors. You know, I lived in New York and I knew all kinds of people. I didn't know any directors. So I said, oh my God, who's going to direct this thing? And I said, well, I could try it, you know, using what I'd learned from Patterson. And it was huge success. And then we got another bigger space because some people who came to see it really championed us. But, you know, we were doing all these things, and I was working in restaurants, and I was going into debt, and I wasn't doing anything for my own career. I was just trying to keep the company together. And then I did, someone said, if you want to, you better do something quick, because you'll find that there's nobody wants to even hire you anymore. So I saw an ad in Backstage for a play, and I went and auditioned, and I got hired. And it too was a big success, and it had a lot of industry people come to it. And you know, I got an agent out of it, and a really good agent. And next thing I know, I get a call saying they want to see you for this movie. And you know, I was so green. I didn't know what I was doing. Anyway, I got hired, and I went to Toronto, and I felt like I was flying to Paris. I'd never been to Canada. I was like, wow, this is crazy.
Wow. On a natural high and an actual flight at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just nothing like it, man.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Let me ask you this now. One of your first 3 film roles, you were working with on a Ridley Scott film, which is insane. One of your first 3 film roles. See, man, you already had a trajectory. You're going there. You worked as Bobby in 1989's Black Rain, starring Michael Douglas. Could you describe what the experience is like? And personally, for me, was there any intimidation factor, or was it more so iron sharpens iron, or I'm going to learn? What's it like when you're on set with him?
Well, you know, one of the greatest things about having studied with Patterson was you felt like you knew what you were doing. You know, no matter what the circumstances were, you know, a big star, a famous director, that can be really intimidating in and of itself. But if you really felt like you knew what to do, how to break down the role and how to comport yourself and do the homework, then a lot of that silliness is sort of removed. But the reason I got the role in Black Rain was that a casting director friend asked me if I would be willing to work as a reader on the movie. So I would play the Michael Douglas role, and all these male and female big name famous people would come in. I'd be sitting across them, you know, on a couch. Some really famous people, and that was really cool because I felt like I was holding my own, you know, and it was fun. There was no pressure on me. I was just the reader. I was getting paid, you know, by the week. And we did this for like, I don't know, a month every day. The very last day we were doing it, I was walking to the door, and he was walking ahead of me, and he left before I did. And he turned before he left, and he said, I want to thank you for all you've done. You've been terrific, and you are definitely going to be in this film. And I was like, what? I wasn't even in the union. So they had to Taft-Hartley me into the union, and next thing you know, I'm at the 23rd Street Armory in Manhattan looking for, and I had no idea what I was doing. People
That's
are like,
so cool.
yeah,
we've heard a lot of audition stories because it's one of the most interesting, especially the early auditions, and that is That's one. That's pretty unique because I think that's the only time we've ever heard somebody auditioning without knowing they're auditioning and then getting a role.
Oh yeah, it
pretty
was
awesome.
great. It was really cool, and it was funny because the very first person they brought in, I don't know who it was. It wasn't Andy Garcia, but it was somebody of that stature. And there's a really, kind of a nasty
It's
scene
like-
between Michael Douglas and, being Mr. Method. He's across from the coffee table on the couch, and I'm on the other side of a different couch. Ridley's in the middle, and there's a scene where I'm supposed to grab him and like throttle him, and I get up and I like. He goes, oh, all right, Tim, let's just. This is no contact, okay?
You got to pay the
I was like,
touch.
sorry, man. It's just in the moment, Ridley.
Hey,
Sorry, Ridley. Yeah.
I mean,
I
nothing else really gets you. I don't think anything else really gets you ready for acting after going through the coach you went through. But then, like, you're there. It's like you can't get any better, like on the job training, like famous person, not just famous person, talent.
Oh,
Who's really like, okay, here we go. I'm stuck. Yeah, I like that.
It was
man.
it was a great gift to be able to, and I did that on probably 3 occasions for different films, all cast by the same person.
I feel like I'd be angry at myself for not thinking about this until I was editing this later. So I'm very happy that I thought about it now, and you could feel free to pass if you want. But was there anybody that came in for those auditions that was like, oh man, I can't put like they're here, they're going for this, and then they didn't get it, like something that maybe IMDb doesn't even know about.
Oh, I mean,
almost casting call.
well, obviously the vast majority of people who come into audition don't wind up getting the job. I mean, I could name like 10 people, and they're all household names, and none of them got the job. And I think not necessarily because they were thought to be not up to it, but I think Ridley Scott was thinking in terms of chemistry and even height comparisons, complexion comparisons. Those things I think will sometimes enter into the mix.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the other very common thing we hear with the audition stories is that you don't get most of them, and most of the time it has nothing to do with you and everything, but just they have something very particular in mind that they're going for.
Right.
Okay, this would not be the last time that you worked with Ridley Scott. You returned for one of my favorite films, 2003's Matchstick Men, where you play Bishop. You have the rare opportunity of acting in a scene with a sedated Nicolas Cage. So you're probably one of the only actors that had to carry a scene when Nicolas Cage was in it, because he was literally.
I'm sure he still tried to carry it.
Or
So,
Nick-
I'm sedated. I could still do it.
Well, yeah. What was that? What was that like?
Yeah.
I mean, the scene came out great, by the
Well,
way.
here's a really cool thing. I read the script and I was like, this is real. This is, you read a lot of scripts and it's pretty rare that you go, wow, this is really good. And I really thought that was good. And then when I found that Ridley Scott was doing it, I was like, really? It seems like kind of a small movie for him. And then I found out Nick Cage was starring in it. I was like, wow, this is pretty be so cool. Anyway, I got hired. I was thrilled. And I'm sitting around my apartment in LA one day, and I get a call from the agent saying, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I don't know why. She goes, Ridley Scott wants to see you at 3:00 at his office with Nick Cage. I was like, huh. Am I in some kind of trouble? Is he, hey, listen, we thought about it. We found somebody better or, more famous. I get there and they're sitting in Ridley's office, which you could imagine it'd be pretty nice, leather, everything, and big decanters of scotch, cigars. And we're just sitting around smoking cigars and drinking scotch, getting to know each other. And I'm like pinching myself going, am I dreaming this or am I actually sitting here with Nick Cage and Ridley Scott? So that was it. And then we shot it about a month later.
I mean, I think you called us dreaming, like we were there. We tried to embody it, like, yeah, man, I can see it. I can feel it.
I was trying to actually project myself through your story.
And we didn't even run the script. I was like, oh God, maybe I should have tried to learn my part, man. I don't know what we're gonna do. Well,
Wow.
I can drink scotch and smoke a cigar.
There we go. You may have forgotten that was the first movie. You let me hold it on deep in the DVD days. You mentioned you got to watch this. You definitely got to watch this.
In my mind, I was thinking that role came did Ridley Scott remember you, or did you just start from?
I don't know if he did or not. I can't. He's not a small talk kind of guy. I mean, talk about all business. I've never seen a director on TV or film as efficient and on it. I mean, in fact, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I got a call because I got my sort of schedule way in advance, and I got a call saying that you need to come in to do your stuff this week because he's like 4 weeks ahead of schedule.
Wow.
That's unheard of. He knows exactly what he wants, and he knows exactly what he's looking for, angle-wise, how it's going to cut together. It's not a wasted moment.
I'm pretty sure he has 2 films coming out like within the next year or so, and he's getting up there. And I know, and I'm sure you know as well how grueling a film set is. And I mean, it adds 3 years for every 6 months to your.
Oh, yeah.
But for some people, though, it's one of those things to where they do it, and I hope this doesn't happen to him. But you love something so much, like if you're not doing it, you.
I'm just saying, if the film thing doesn't work out for Ridley Scott, he could bottle up his stamina and sell that as a side hustle.
No kidding. Yeah. No, it was really interesting to watch just how economical and professional he was. I mean, there's a certain amount of respect that goes into that does. It bespeaks a certain amount of respect he has for money and time. Because, it's so easy in Hollywood, for example, to just waste tons and tons of money. And, needlessly, really, on take, showing up, not knowing what you want to shoot, BSing with your DP saying, what do you want to do? I don't know. I don't know. How do you see this? With these guys, like, you hit the ground running.
And especially working with Nicolas Cage, who he's got to be efficient because he's doing like 13 films a year.
He couldn't have been nicer. He couldn't have been.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, we hear that a lot. We talked to his
stunt double.
Yeah, his
permanent double. Yeah,
and, permanent double. Yeah, everybody that's worked with him always has nothing but awesome things to say. Which, I mean, of course, you see him. I don't think just based on the girth of his projects, it doesn't seem like there's any director out there that isn't willing to work with him. So that speaks for itself.
Have you seen the one he did about his own career with Pedro Pascal?
Yeah, The Unbearable Weight. That was
like trying to get me to go see that. I haven't seen that yet.
I know it goes without saying because it's a character based on him, but aside from Matchstick Men, that's probably the best role that's ever been written for him. It was an exaggerated version of himself.
He plays the young Nick Cage, and he plays the current Nick Cage. It's great.
Man, I don't know that Con Air, man. I told you I get that bunny, that Con Air, man. Now, we're going to time travel a little bit here. Now, of course, we were Matchstick Men in 2003, but then we back up here to 1992. You were a cop in Malcom X. Now, as a proud New York actor that you are, what was it like working on set with another yet great director and Spike Lee? Anybody else we got coming up? Anybody?
Oh, man. That was really cool. I mean, I read the autobiography of Malcom X when I was in high school, and I was really when I heard that I was going to get hired or I had an audition for it, I was really psyched. I think I'd seen all of Spike's movies up to that point. I liked some better than others, but just the prospect of shooting a movie about Malcom X in my home city was like, boy, I can't blow this. So I was really prepared when I went in. And it was kind of funny because Spike was working down at Tribeca Film Studio down in Tribeca. And I walked in, and his cousin, Malcolm, was the reader. Malcolm's now gone on to be a director and a producer, too. Really nice guy. And we're doing the scene. And I'm still really new at this, really. And I realized in the middle of it, it's a really small room, and Spike's right on the one side, and Malcolm's right in front of me. And we're doing the scene. The first thing, and I realized that he skipped an entire page. And because I had no experience, I didn't know whether to go, oh, I'm sorry, could we stop it? We skipped a whole page of dialogue. In a nanosecond, I just chose to improvise and just go and not say a word. So we finished the whole audition, and I'm like, oh no, I can't believe I had this great opportunity and I just blew it. And so Spike says, oh, thanks for coming in. Oh, yeah. I'm walking to the elevator. I'm getting to the elevator, and the door's about to close, and Spike is going to the restroom. And he stopped, and he goes, hey, man, you did a really, really good job. And I went, yeah, right. And he goes, no, I'm serious. You did a good job. I was like, all right, thank you. And I go back to L.A. About a month later, I get a call saying you're hired. But it was really cool. It was, can you imagine working with Denzel and just all these people?
Hold on, be honest. How close were you saying for you to say, or were you saying, You know, a line was missed, right? Like, I mean, I just want you to know a line was missed. How close were you? Did you think?
Well, I wasn't. I mean, it happened so quickly. I had to make
You're in the
this
moment.
decision in
You're in the
less
moment.
than a split second, and I just decided, no, I'm not going to risk, embarrassing his cousin, and
Correct.
maybe
Make
he
the
did
right
it on
decision.
purpose. I don't know.
Yeah. And to run into the director in the hallway, like before you get on the elevator, is like something straight out of a movie.
Yeah, it really was. And
His name is Malcolm. His cousin's
I
name
was
is
thinking
Malcolm.
about it. I said, well, you didn't
Yeah.
have to say that, but
No, that's cool. I like
So Malcolm X, of course, was filmed in the height of the Rodney King and environment. It's not too different than what we find ourselves in today. Was there any trepidation on your part playing a police officer, especially in your hometown?
No. I mean, I grew up in an environment where like lots of my guys that I went to grammar school and high school with became cops. I thought seriously about becoming a cop. My grandfather was a cop in New York. I just thought I was just thrilled to be part of this incredible story with this incredible cast and with this incredible director in New York City. And it was just like, again, you're playing a guy who's not very pleasant, but just play him as best you can. And it's funny because you mentioned the Turtles, and I was so proud of having been in that movie that after I did Turtles, I would go and I'd get an audition, and producers, directors would be sitting around, and I'm just waiting for them to go. So how was it working on Malcolm X, and how was it working with Spike? First thing they would say, "You were Raphael in Ninja Turtles," and I was like, "Yeah." And I Spike Lee and no Turtle, huh? Were you in the suit? No.
I can't shake my head at them because that was the first thing that grabbed my attention. We're 80s babies, so when I saw Raphael, I'm like, oh my god! And you're working with Corey Feldman, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll go easy. All right, so of course now at this point you've been working in law enforcement for a few years. Later in another Spike, he's actually been in Spike Lee joints. There you go. As a narc in 1995's Clockers. Now, was that happenstance, or did that come from your relationship with Spike from before?
Robbie, casting director, terrific. She cast me in a few things. She used to cast most of his things, and she cast Malcolm X and Clockers. So she brought me in to see him again, and I think I was hired pretty quickly on that. And I got along really well with Spike on Malcolm X.
Did you get the audition with all the pages on this one?
Yes.
Nice. Progress.
We're moving up.
Yeah, and as you probably know, Spike wasn't supposed to have directed that movie. It was going to be Scorsese originally.
I did not know.
We did not know that. Was that on IMDb? Probably not.
And I didn't.
I don't think it is. New nugget. We got a new nugget. So I did not know that either. Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty. So when you were auditioning, was Spike Lee already attached to it at that point?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it was definitely Spike.
So I can't even. I feel bad getting into this now after what you just said, but we're here. You were the voice of Raphael in 1993's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3. This one, when I went and I looked at the first, second, third one, it was interesting. It looks like on the third one they went back to all the original voice actors, with the exception, of course, you playing Raphael. Do you know what led to you getting that part? Because it seemed like they were trying to go back to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but my recollection is that the guy who originally did it wanted more money than they paid first time.
That's probably safe.
They would throw nickels around like they were manhole covers, as they say in Brooklyn. But this is kind of funny because again. I knew the assistant casting director on this, and she called me one night at about 5 o'clock and said, "I know you do all kinds of weird voices and stuff. Can you do one of the Ninja Turtles?" And I was like, "I don't know what that is." And she said, "Well, okay." And I said, "I don't know." She said, "Well, he's like a real New York guy." I said, "Well, I could probably do that." So she said, "Well, you have an audition tomorrow at 11." So I run out to the Blockbuster. This is like prehistoric times. I go to Blockbuster and I get a copy of the first two, and I'm listening to the voices, and I'm working on it. I feel like I'm ready to go. I go into the audition. She comes up and she says, "Okay, come on, it's time for you to meet the director." And as we're walking down the steps, this is my friend. She turns, she goes, "Oh, I meant to tell you, they don't want him to sound anything like the other guy." I'm like, you know.
Oh, you meant to tell me,
It
didn't you?
would have been a little helpful if you had mentioned that, like last night. So I walk in, I'm like, here we go again. I wasted my time. I wasted my trip to Blockbuster, And so and just honest to God, I did it. I was not real happy. I walked out and I'm in the parking lot getting ready to put the key in the door. And I hear her say, Tim, come here. And I figured she'd go, I'm really sorry for doing that. I said, oh, yeah. She goes, well, come on, he wants to talk to you. And I was like, oh, was it that bad? I sit down and the guy goes, congratulations, you're Raphael. This is the director, Stuart. And I'm like, are you serious? Is this how it is?
How easy it is, kids.
How did you
just like
that? I mean, do you feel like you just didn't successfully pivot to like from doing an imitation to?
Yeah, I just tried to do it like one of the guys from the neighborhood, And
that's awesome. Wonder why they didn't want it to sound like.
I don't know.
Now, I was going to ask, were you in when you were in the voiceover studio with the other shells, the other turtles, or was it separate?
No. We actually Corey Feldman was incredibly hospitable. He invited all of us to go, I guess, to his house. It was like a little recording studio, just to like run it. But we never were in the same room during the voiceover stuff. You went to, it was at Universal, and you went to this beautiful, post-production room. It's all dark, and you put the headphones on. The guys are doing the martial arts stuff, and somebody's already done on set the line, so you just have to do to match the movement of the mouth and the character voice. But that was so much fun.
Yeah, I could imagine.
It really was.
You had no, before going to Blockbuster and getting the Ninja Turtles on VHS, you had no previous experience with them?
No.
That's crazy.
Did you have any previous voiceover job experience prior to that?
I had done one sun-kissed orange soda commercial. Voiceover. Yeah, that was it.
I could totally hear your voice as Raphael, though. That's the thick New Yorker for sure. And yeah, thank you for going straight into the Corey Feldman. That was my question, because we both grew up on Corey Feldman, and he's definitely become a polarizing figure because of his outspokenness about certain things. But you don't really hear anybody that can actually say anything negative about him.
You can't say anything about the 80s without Corey Feldman. He's a part of it. He's like the time capsule of the 80s.
Yeah. I mean, he grew up in that business, and apparently a lot of it was not at all pleasant for him. And but like I said, my only contact with him was that first day when he invited us over, and then we did some public PR stuff. There was like a big fundraiser at Universal, and all these celebrities brought their kids and to meet the turtles, and we signed autographs and that kind of thing. But every time I was around him, he couldn't have been more cordial and positive and friendly.
That's cool. I think I'm one of the few people that enjoy his new music sincerely, and any chance that I get, I like to let people know to go check out Corey Feldman, Ascension, Millennium. If you can get beyond the feeling like the whole world is laughing at it and actually listen to it, it's a pretty good song.
Cool.
I'll add to my playlist.
Yeah.
See what we just both did to you?
It is like the like if you ordered Michael Jackson on Wish.
Hey man, it's still music. Music's great, man.
I enjoy it sincerely.
Now you work with a lot of great directors and a lot of great talent, which leads me to believe, of course, that as long as you work, clearly you're great at what you do and you take your craft seriously. Now, another great actor and talent, rest in peace, that you did work with was Robin Williams in 1996's The Birdcage. Are there any stories that you care to share that just come to mind from working with him and the time you spent on that set?
Yeah, I'll tell you one story about Robin Williams, that thief.
There he goes.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you this one story, and I'll tell you some nicer stories. And this is not bad.
You just made every comedian in the 80s just like, oh, we're listening. We hear you.
We're doing this thing, and I chose to do when he asked me. I said the Kennedys are here tonight, and I start doing it like in a Hyannisport accent, like the Kennedys are here, and then he starts doing it in rehearsals. He starts doing it back, and so Mike Nichols finally comes up and he goes, "All right, what are you doing, Robin? All right, I'll tell you what. Both of you drop the Boston accent." And I'm like, "You jerk!" But I told him a story, which he didn't remember, of course. But when I was in acting school on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, there was a local pub called Cafe Central, and it was owned by Treat Williams and John Savage and about 5 working actors. Dana Delaney was one. Every celebrity. Bruce Willis was one of the bartenders, and the other bartender was John Goodman. So there were unknown people at that time. Yeah.
Wow.
John Goodman got the first
Get
break
outta
with
here.
the milk commercial. And that place was packed every night with all kinds of celebrities, but it was like a real neighborhood place. And one night, Robin Williams was in there, David Carradine was in there, and Pam Darby was in there from Mork and Mindy. And he's coked out of his head. We're in the bathroom together. It's like a tiny little bathroom, and we get locked in. So it took us like 10 to 15 minutes to get to Nanu. So finally, we finally get out, and I forget if he said something funny like, I hope it meant as much to you as it did to me or whatever. And I told him that story. He had no recollection, of course. But he did tell me the story. I said, hey, I had read a really touching story about you and Christopher Reeve, about how you went in there and, he was paralyzed and you went in with the crazy Russian accent and the surgical mask and said, I'm here to do a rectal exam. And he made Christopher Reeve laugh. What I didn't know is they were like really almost like best friends. They went to Juilliard together and they were both each other's kids' godparents. So Robin Williams was
Williams and Christopher Reeve.
Yeah.
Wow, that is interesting.
Yeah, it was really he was he was special.
Beautiful soul. Definitely beautiful soul.
Yeah. I had read something about him once that when he was on a film set, when he worked on a film, one of his stipulations was that they had to hire local homeless people.
I heard that about what was that movie with him and Jeff Bridges?
The Fisher King.
The Fisher King, right? I heard that. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's where I was going with that.
But yeah,
sure if it's beautiful. Awesome soul. Rest in peace. Now, speaking of, rest in peace to the whole world, because we're talking about Roland Emmerich's Independence Day. Roland Emmerich, the man who has killed the whole world more times than any other filmmaker, his films seem to operate on a whole other scale, even by Hollywood standards. What was that experience like for you working on a Roland Emmerich picture?
Okay, well, I was working a lot at that time, and so I had auditions like for much bigger roles that I wasn't available to go in on. And by the time I was free, my schedule was free, my agent called and said, they're still seeing people for that movie, and they want to see you for another role. I said, well, really? What is it? Well, it's this. I said, well, it's kind of a little role. Yeah, but it's going to be a good movie. And then I said, well, where's the audition? They said, it's out in Marina Del Rey. And I was like, oh, God, Marina Del Rey, it's like 45 minutes. Get in the car and go to the audition. So I do. Thank God I did, because that movie has, it's been a very generous movie in terms of the residual effect.
I got that.
So I'm sitting there, and first day I'm on the set, and remember how I said that a guy like Ridley Scott knows exactly what he's going to do when he walks in the room? Mm-hmm. That wasn't the case with this movie. So I'm sitting there, and I'm watching this mayhem, and I'm like, and they're talking, well, what do you think should happen here? I don't know. How we would put the cat? I don't know. Maybe shake it over your, I don't know. And I was sitting there, and I'm looking, and I literally said this to myself. I said, who in the world's going to come to watch a stupid movie like this? Cut to my friends calling me like the week before. Weren't you in Independence Day? I said, yeah, why? People are camping out, scalping tickets to get into this. I was like, oh, come on. So I had my finger on the pulse of the industry way back.
Yeah,
wow, that's insane. That's crazy.
Like so much going on in a film like that. It's very surprising to hear that it was just kind of like, what are we doing? What's happening?
Well, what do you feel?
Yeah, it was another great cast. We got to work with Robert Loggia, who's from my neighborhood in New York, and a guy that I had loved as a kid. It's like, he's one of the guys who was like from the hood, got famous, and so
it's amazing. It's amazing.
And Will Smith. Well, I worked with Will Smith later on, but I think I met him on set that time.
I feel like Bill Pullman is the best president that we never actually had.
Hey man, he's
He was
Lone
good
Star.
and really
He's
nice.
Lone Star, right?
I compare every real life president to how do they stack up against Bill Pullman in Independence Day?
Now, the reason that we are all here, the cult classic, we don't debate. It is the Negotiator. Yes, you played Argento, one of my favorite characters. I rewound it. I knew who he was, David. And of course, now you were working with some of the shady cops with Grant Frost. Now, do you happen to remember auditioning for this particular role? And was there mayhem on this? I got to know now. He's telling us about the mayhem.
Oh no, I clearly remember the whole audition process because, you know, we may get to him, but J.T. Walsh and I had done a TV series together called Dark Skies. I was also in another movie with him, Executive Decision. But during Dark Skies, we became really, really good friends. I mean, I kind of looked to him as like a big brother, uncle, mentor, friend. I was crazy about him. And he was really good to me. And I was in Brooklyn. It was summertime, and he was on the East Coast. We were going to try and get together, but it didn't work. But he said to me, well, I got hired to do this movie. I said, what is it? He goes, it's called The Negotiator. And I said, yeah, any good? He goes, yeah, it's all right. He said, but, you know, they're paying me pretty good. And I said, how much? He goes, I'm not going to tell you. And I said, how much? He goes, if I told you, you'd start crying. So anyway, I get back to LA, and sure enough, I get an audition. And I think most of the guys wound up having to read the Hellman sides, the one that Nestor Serrano winds up playing. But yeah, and again, that I heard back on that probably within a week, which is kind of unusual for a movie to hear that quickly. And that was a blast, man.
When I watched the movie, I know that I read that it's dedicated to him, and he passed away a few months before it premiered. Do you know if there was like a cast screening? Like, it's strange to me when I watch something, and it's like the ultimate gift that a performer gives when I'm getting to see him do something that he didn't even get to experience. If that were the case, he passed before it was completed.
Yeah. He and I, because the shoot went through Christmas in LA. I decided not to go back to New York for Christmas that year, and so JT invited me to a dinner at a director's house, and had a great time. And I remember that night, Christmas night, we're in the kitchen getting ready to leave, and he turns to me, he says, I think I'm going to die soon. And I went,
wow.
What? He's like 54. And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, yeah. I just think I'm going to die pretty soon. 2 months and 2 days later, that was it.
That's incredible. That's yeah. I mean, what else can you really say about that? That's
that was
that's kind of haunting.
Yeah.
I mean, you get those. I mean, you hear about people having premonitions and stuff, but I think that's the only time I've ever heard somebody that had a personal experience with somebody, predicting their own. That's wild. Thank you for sharing that.
And he was trying to, he was in the process of getting himself healthy. He died in a place I think it was called Optimum Health Clinic or something down in the San Diego area, because he wanted to lose some weight, stop smoking. And it was the last day of that program. I think maybe a 2-week program. And they were all sitting around in a circle, sort of summing up their experience. And he just fell out of his chair. And there was a doctor making the program, and the doctor said that he was dead before he hit the floor.
Wow. Goodness gracious. Well, definitely rest in peace. And definitely all our condolences. He was a great talent too, man. Definitely.
Oh, man. And he was so incredibly well respected by everybody. Nicholson adored him.
The movie would not. I mean, it was great performances all around, but the movie really wouldn't have worked if his character specifically wasn't believable. The whole thing hinged on him not really knowing exactly what to make of him, but not, it's great.
Now, I was going to ask now, on your Hall of Fame list of your resume of directors you've worked with, let's just keep it on going. Here we go. What was it like personally working with F. Gary Gray, and how did his leadership or directing differ from some of the other directors you've worked with?
I loved Gary. There was a little concern, my impression, because he had never directed a film before. He had, I don't think, he had come from music videos. He was really popular.
I think
So
the only thing he did before Negotiator was Friday, and then
yeah,
he
okay,
stepped
yeah.
off maybe.
Mhm.
But this was a big budget for him.
Oh yeah,
and
this is
lots of
step up.
action. And so I was told that, and this might just be a hearsay, but that the studio made sure that he had a really, really good DP to work with, and that was Russell Carpenter, who had won an Oscar for Titanic. And early on, you know, JT could be a real bugger. I mean, he would do anything for anybody, but he was tough, and he gave Gary a hard time. Like for the first 3 days, he was really harsh with him. You know, don't waste my time. Was, you know, professional. By the end of the movie, they were thick as thieves. In fact, the day after JT died, I got a call from Gary at home saying, "Listen, I know you and JT were close. I'm just so sorry. And if there's anything I can do, please let me know." And I was like, "Man, you know, I love Gary, and JT came to love him, and we all did, I think."
Do you think that that dynamic between JT and Gary on the set had anything to do with JT Walsh's acting style? Because I know he's playing a very authoritarian figure that has an edge to him, his character. Do you think that bled into?
I don't know if it was like a role bleeding into the personal dynamic. JT had an edge. There's no doubt about it. But like I said, they both really came to admire each other, and they were very affectionate. And I know they both learned from each other. I know that Gary learned a lot, because JT was a consummate pro and a really, really smart guy. I mean, really, he was really into like philosophy and abstract things about computers. He could take a computer apart and build one. He was so keenly smart. He was in contact with a couple of Supreme Court justices. He would have correspondence with. He was nuts.
So, Nestor Serrano.
I don't want to talk about him.
Yeah. Okay. So you guys, I know we kind of had a brief dialogue about this, setting up the interview, that you guys have since become friends after the Negotiator. What was that? Was that your first meeting on the Negotiator? And for those who don't know, Nestor Serrano played Hellman, who was the other, you guys were kind of like the shady team in the shadows, making things happen. So is that where you met him at, was on the Negotiator? Yeah,
I mean, I was aware of him, but I had never met him in person. And I don't know how you guys met or what your first impressions of each other were. But when I was, oh, this is the guy from this time and so on. And there's only one chair open at this huge read through at the studio. And every actor was there, producers, writers, and tech people. And there's only one chair left, and I go and I sit next to him, and I said, "Hey, my name's Tim." He's like, "Oh, really? Oh, right? Oh, really? I know where you're from. Okay, I'm not that impressed." So we'll tell this story every time we get together, and we have diametrically opposed recollections of it. And so
you know what happened. He knows what really happened. He knows what really.
Deep down, he knows. But he's one of the best.
Oh man!
And like you say, you've went on to cast him in the pilot that you worked on. What's it like directing him?
It was he was in a short film that I directed. It was him, Paul Giamatti from Negotiator, and David Morse was in it too.
You did a short film with Paul Giamatti, Nestor Serrano, and David Morse.
Yeah. And John Costello. You might know him from The Sopranos. He played Johnny Cakes.
Yeah. This isn't on your IMDb. I didn't see this.
It's going to be tonight when you update it.
Can we? Yeah. Is this something that people can find?
No, not yet. I mean, I need to get that. I need to do something with that, because it was the short film is. I'd like to expand that into a feature. But to get those guys, I mean, I was so incredibly lucky. And then the pilot is kind of, like I said, it's a comedy about three knuckleheads. And Nestor had never done a comedy, and he's really funny. But he's, I know what it's like. You get typecast, and they don't want to even think. They don't think of you as, somebody who could possibly do comedy if you play sinister, creepy guys.
Those are usually the funniest people, though.
Oh my God, he's hilarious in this thing. He's the funniest thing in the whole show.
I wanted to know what was the most challenging part for you personally filming on The Negotiator?
There's one. I'll tell you one funny story that all those guys love to tell when we're together. So we trained with the LAPD SWAT for a while, and that was really cool. And the very end, we were all brought together, and the guy in charge of LA SWAT, he said, "Now listen, guys, I've taught you everything the right way to do it. You know, by the book. This is the way we do it in real life. Now you're gonna be making a movie, and the director's gonna, I'm sure, is gonna tell you something that you know is not what you do. Do me a favor, don't question it. I don't want to look bad, okay? Yeah, of course, we got it." Cut to about 3 weeks later, we're on a bridge in the middle of Chicago. We're all in our SWAT stuff. We got like hundreds of extras, you know, it's just crazy. Gary has the whole crew together, and he's giving us instructions. He's saying, "So you guys are going to come like this. You're going to get out of the car. You're going to have the guns like this. And any questions?" And I let him. I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You know, when we were training with SWAT, they said, and every head in the place like this." And Gary said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, no. We're good." Idiot.
Oh, me,
so good. You got Farley.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all that. You set us up. You said at the beginning of this that your answers were not going to be that great, and these have been some of the most fantastic, thoughtful answers.
Oh.
He's an actor, David.
Oh, you guys are very kind. Thank you. So, how did you guys get to know each other?
We had 3 different chances. He was auditioning for a role. Was it Lonely Hearts?
That was the second time. The first time it was the yeah, it was Lonely Hearts.
Yeah,
it was.
so the Lonely Hearts with John Travolta and James Gandolfini was shooting in Jacksonville, and a buddy of mine named Reggie was going to audition and was taking him to audition, and he's like, my friend can hook you up with a quick audition tape to bring with you. So he came out, he brought him up to my apartment. We met, did his tape. I didn't talk to him again for 2-3 years.
Don't you worry, that was the big fish that got away. Continue though, please.
And then another friend of mine that I was doing music with at the time, he came over to my studio one night, and he was with him. I was like, "Did I know you from somewhere?" And he's like, "Yeah, don't you do music?" I rap. You didn't use the word rap.
I did not say it like that.
But yeah, so then we started doing music together. That was 2007, and then we both realized that we love film and started working on movies, and yeah, here we are.
Well, you guys are really good at what you do here. I mean,
I appreciate that.
I hope you're gaining an audience. You should.
Well, after this interview, just go to the roof, baby.
So you were Stuart Goodman. No segue here. I'm just going to launch right back into it. 2008's 7 Pounds opposite Will Smith. And you guys share a pretty intense scene in the hospital, which culminates in a very believable face shove. Unlike Nicolas Cage in Matchstick Men, Will Smith was very much not sedated. What was it like going toe-to-toe with the Fresh Prince?
It was great. I mean, we had an earlier scene where we shot really early in the morning, and there's another situation where I got a call saying, "Can you come into the studio and meet Gabrielle, the director?" And so I walk into this little tiny office, and there was Will Smith and the director and me, and we're just hanging around talking nonsense for 2 hours. And they had a real rapport because they had done whatever the movie was before that they had done together. I think it was kind of a post-apocalypse kind of movie.
Oh, After Earth? That wasn't After Earth. It was
no.
I Am Legend. Yeah.
But they had a really good rapport. And I remember being on set really early in the morning. We're doing the scene, and there's a big flat between us and where the studio, the camera village is. And so, the director's from Italy. So it's a close up on Will Smith, and he's doing it, and we're doing another take, and the director's, "Come on, Will, you can do it, Will." And Will Smith's like,
Willard,
not helping. Not helping. So when we did the scene with the putting the head through the glass, that was it was pretty cool. But I think Will liked that scene a little too much because he kept on asking for additional takes, and then he kept wanting to rewind it and play it for the entire crew.
Yeah, so it's your fault. That's where he got the taste, and then fast forward like a few decades.
Okay, the foundation of the Rock fans.
It was.
I got you.
I almost put it in the script, but it was low hanging fruit. I didn't want to go there, but it's a joke. It's a joke. We all have those moments. Okay.
Yeah. I was seeing double for about 3 days.
It did look very. I mean, I don't.
No,
like
it was cool. It was really cool.
Was there real contact? It looked pretty real.
Yeah, but it's like that candy glass. It gives pretty easily.
Okay. Before we move out of that, one of the most a lot of people are grading that film. One of the most underrated performances in that film that people forget about is Woody Harrelson.
Oh yeah.
Killed it. He absolutely killed it. Okay. Did Thomas put you up to this? Yeah. All right. So let's move forward a little bit now. Yet again, you are not the luckiest, the most prepared and greatest trajectory of working with every director in the world. Almost in 2010, you worked with Christopher Nolan. Inception. Now, going into a Nolan project, how much did you know? How much did you have to prepare? And of course, with Leonardo DiCaprio, you're the guy that gentleman that hands him the plane ticket. So let me ask you this first. Oh, I forgot about that. It was also I thought about Catch Me If You Can too. Sorry, the plane ticket. Sorry. Okay, but anyway, what did you? Okay, so now you're scaling up. You're going into a Nolan film. What is it like compared to being on that set versus the other sets that you've been on?
Like no other set. Like it was totally different. The only thing I knew was where the parking was.
So no context going into like what your character, how your character fits into the bigger picture.
And I think the actual audition material was from Batman. I don't think he was even from Inception. So I had no idea. And when he had me on the set and he's explaining what's going on, he's talking about, so this is the present, this is like a dream, this is the future. I'm like, where do I stand? Because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Goodness grief.
That is, I was really hoping that you'd have some kind of answers for us.
I wish,
still trying to wrap my head exactly
I wanted to meet Michael Caine, but I missed him by like an hour.
I was just going to say Michael Caine. I was
Michael Caine.
So, excuse me.
The trail was right next to mine. I was like, oh man, I got to meet Michael Caine.
That's amazing, man.
So doing the research on you, it's pretty obvious that religion is apparently a very important part of your life. From Catholic school to studying theology and scripture in college, you're currently a deacon and you serve as a media editor of First Things magazines, that's where you wrote, directed, produced your documentary film called The Creed: What Christians Profess and Why It Ought to Matter, which we'll get into in just a second. But as somebody who grew up Christian, I know my mom, like most of the films on your resume, I wouldn't have been allowed to watch. So I was just curious what role faith plays in your trajectory as an actor, if it's a hindrance or just how you interpret that and how you bridge those two worlds.
Oh, I think that, it's an intrinsic part of it. I think what really, when I left the Jesuits, I left with the intention of going back someday. I just didn't know when, but before I began to study acting in New York, I took a bus trip from New York to Mexico, and I stopped at a good friend of mine's place in Kentucky. He was a good old boy from down there. He had gone to Yale, but he was still, he was a country boy. And I got there. He said, "Listen, I'm going to take you to the movies tonight. You're going to love this movie. I'm going to show you." And I said, "What's it called?" He said, "It's called Raging Bull." I said, No. He said, "What do you mean no?" I said, "I've seen the commercials for it. I grew up around these guys. I don't find them funny, charming. I find them creepy. Up to here with those guys." And he said, "Oh, come on, you trust me, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And we went to see it. I was blown away. It was probably the first Scorsese movie I had ever seen. And at the end, you may remember, the screen goes black, and then there's a quote from the Gospel of John. But the young guy gets cured of blindness. And he says to the authorities, say to him, "Who is this guy who cured you? Was he the Son of God? Who is he?" They're trying to trap him. And the kid says, "I don't know who he was. All I know is I was blind, and now I can see." And boom. And I'm like, holy Christmas. That was like a harsh movie. And yet, this is what Scorsese must think, it's about. And it's so powerful. And then it began to dawn on me. And I was like, duh. What does Jesus do when he teaches? It's all stories, parables. The Good Samaritan. All these stories are ways of imparting some deep truth. And you can do that with plays. You can do it with any art, really, and you can certainly do it with film.
Yeah, that is pretty. It's a very effective way to get across a very big idea with like it's pretty cool. With stories, you can tell a very simple story, but convey a very big idea. Like
yeah, I mean, Steve Jobs is famous for having said a lot of things, but having said the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. I mean, that may be a little bit exaggerated, but there's something to that, you know.
Yeah, I mean, think about historians. They're storytellers in their own right, and that's really all that we have to go on as far as like, you know, I mean, down to the Bible itself is a collection of stories.
Some of the great stories, and a lot of them have made their way in one form or another onto the screen.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess there really isn't much to do to bridge those two worlds. They are very much cousins of each other.
Now, what was the experience like for you writing and directing the film, especially one that's addressed such a serious subject matter that was close to home?
That was hard. It was hard because I had to kind of do it on my own, and which meant I had to produce it and write it in the sense that I had to sort of envision it in a certain way, and it wasn't a conventional way. Like what I didn't want, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but I didn't want my film to be this. I didn't want it to be one of those things where it opens and you have the kind of blurry sand with the sun rising and the Middle Eastern music, you know, and the guy narrating, you know, the sands freeze 300 BC. I wanted something to feel like you just said, like these people, these scholars were actually having a conversation. So I wanted to be able to get things from. I knew what each scholar was really, really good at. So I would try and get them talking about what they were expert at. And then with the idea in mind that I could then have somebody else play off them, because they were never together. So I had to, you know, I was lucky enough to find a couple of people with equipment. I would put an ad in Backstage or a Craigslist. And, you know, I was really fortunate to find a couple of like shooters who could do sound and edit and the whole thing. But like in the case when I had to go down to Emory University in Atlanta to interview a guy named Luke Timothy Johnson, who's a fabulous guy and a brilliant scholar. And all I had was my little shaky Canon camera, like this big and a shaky tripod that I got for like $10. And I'm not really Scott. And I'm talking to him. He's coming forth with a fountain of like really profound, wise, human things he's saying. And we finally finished, and I'm thank you for your time. And I run downstairs to the cafeteria, and I'm going, God, please let me have recorded the sound, because I put the earphones in, and sure enough, it was there. I was like sweating because it was so many gems that I couldn't afford to have lost, you know. But and then I had a friend in Hollywood who he had his, you know, studio movies. This guy is a hero. Art, if you're listening, thank you again, Art Chudavala. He would leave his job. We'd get together like around midnight, and he would work till 4 a.m. And he told me later on, he said, I didn't want to tell you at the time. He said, I didn't believe we could do this, because the idea that I explained to you of how I wanted it to look, he said, was so incredibly difficult to edit. But we got it done, and he was a hero.
That's awesome. It resonates with me so much, the shooting something and not even being able to wait till you get home to just make sure that you got the audio. That's happened on more than one occasion. I shoot weddings, and I've done a lot of interviews as well. And it's those scenarios where it feels wrong in the moment to just stop the momentum and also like destroy the person's whatever they feel like, whatever confidence they have in you to give you something on the camera is now destroyed. Like, is this guy even getting it? Like, you don't. Yeah, right. All you can do is cross your fingers.
I've seen him run to a car before. I walk out there, it looks like he's defusing a bomb, trying to listen to the sound. Make sure you got it. Like, what are you doing, man?
You don't breathe until you.
Right. Oh yeah, it's scary. But
That's
yeah,
really cool. Like, so you put that's truly independent. Like you
yeah,
really put
yeah,
that thing together by the skin of your teeth and
yeah.
pulling favors.
I think it turned out pretty well. I was lucky to get some really great people. About a handful of people that I reached out to couldn't do it for scheduling things. I mean, I really wanted to get well, there were a number of people, but uh, Cornel West was one guy that I really wanted to have on, and we just couldn't get the schedule.
I know who Cornell West is.
I'm just saying, you said Sir Michael Caine. I can't say the doctor when you say Cornell
Well,
West.
you're just looking at me like,
I
I don't
use the
know who
surnames. I would like to
Cornel
use the
West is.
names.
All right,
Okay, I'm sorry. We're sorry.
So
Yeah.
you threw me off.
No, I put you on.
You really threw me off. Okay, so for those who are interested, what's the Creed about in a nutshell, and where can people find it if they want to check it out?
Well, there's so many different branches or divisions, unfortunately, in Christianity. But one thing that I think every Christian has in common is what they call the Nicene Creed, which, if you see the movie, you'll realize is actually the Constantinopolitan Nicene Creed. And there are 12 articles to it. It begins, "I believe in God the Father, Almighty, Creator of heaven and earth." And people will say these things by rote, but those claims are pretty wild. I mean, you're professing some pretty radical stuff. And my suspicion was, speaking for myself, that we don't really tend to examine those things and really think about what we're saying and what they mean, and do we actually really believe them? And why is it important to unpack it? And what can we learn from opening those things up and exploring? And I think it's endlessly fascinating.
Amazing.
I mean, it's commendable. I mean, if you're going to believe in something, why not dig as deep as you possibly can into it? That's pretty cool. Where can people find it at?
Well, I think right now, First Things is the magazine that sponsored it, that commissioned it actually. And so if you go to firstthings.com, it's a journal that comes out once a month. And right now they're offering it streaming. You can buy it on streaming. You can just own it that way.
Okay,
amazing.
Cool. I'll be sure to include a link to it in the description.
That's awesome. Now, I wanted to ask for young filmmakers out there, can you think of an important lesson, not only that you learned through the project you just did or the process, just from your entire journey, from when you started, from asking, am I good enough, till now? Is there any advice you would give them whatsoever?
Somebody, when I talked to that fellow last week he asked a similar question, and because he works with a lot of young people, and I hadn't thought about it before, but what I found myself saying, and I think there's something to it, I would really encourage people to read books. I mean, real books. And it's great to read them on Kindle and stuff. I do that. But there's something about having a real book, especially really good material. I was recently going through the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. That's a great book, and it's wildly imaginative. And there's something physically different about reading a book than watching something on screen. Now, I'm in the business of putting things on screen, but there are studies that have been done, and it's not a theory, it's a fact, that if you spend so much time in front of digital media, your brain chemistry your brain wiring begins to change. And I would say not in a great way, because all the things that sort of contribute to creativity, the kind of contemplative, introspective kind of thing, that digital world really takes a lot of that energy away through the way it rewires your brain. If you want to read a great book on it, look for a book called The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, I think. It's wow, is it eye-opening, and it's a good read. But yeah, it may sound corny, but don't lose contact with literature and the world, the newspapers and what's going on around you, because it's very easy to get into like a bubble where you just all you have is actor friends and all you have is the industry. That's not life. Your art has to be informed by life, and through the filter of a developed sense of taste and reflection, I think.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Before we get going, is there a project we've covered quite a bit, and I know we barely scratched the surface. Is there a project or role that you're particularly proud of that we didn't discuss?
I felt really incredibly grateful to have been able to work on 13 Days about the Cuban Missile Crisis and play a hero of mine in real life, Ted Sorensen, who wrote the speeches for John F. Kennedy. You know, ask not what your country can do for you. All those things were Ted Sorensen. And so when I got hired to play that, I couldn't believe it. And then I actually got to spend like 3 hours with Ted Sorensen in New York having lunch. It was, you know, like I say, sometimes you get into this business and you go places and you meet people you can't imagine you would ever have had the chance to do when you were a kid. And
did they actually want you to play it like Ted Sorensen, or did they?
Well, that's another story. They didn't really want me to talk to Ted Sorensen at all. But finally, one of the producers sneaked me his contact information and said, "I told him."
That's cool.
Yeah, that was a political thing, but you know, because well, it's not really that important. But he was incredible.
So yeah, I mean, that's just awesome that a role, created a bridge for you to meet a real life hero of yours. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Before we say goodbye, are there any, and it does not have to be about film, it can be about life, music, art, literature, quantum physics, the MCU, doesn't matter. Is there anything you would like to leave, any parting words you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, two things, I guess. But one would be, you know, and I'm not just saying this because I'm a deacon. I'm a deacon because I believe. But, you know, the God word is kind of a weird word in our culture today. I don't know why it is, or it shouldn't be. But anybody who might be out there wondering, questioning, don't give up on God, because God doesn't give up on us. So if you want to learn more, ask the right people, you know, ask people who really are committed. And the other thing is, I want to plug my wife's books. Billy Livingston is a phenomenal writer. She's got like 5 novels out, another one coming out, and she's been nominated for all kinds of awards. So a little free publicity, I appreciate.
And
talk about the real deal.
Happy anniversary once again.
Yeah, thank you, and happy birthday.
Thank
Look
you
at that
very much.
This has been a treat for me. I mean, I'm not just saying that. Again, like I say, I've been following your career for quite some time. And when he told me, usually he has to forward me some information about who we're getting, but I was like, I got it. Don't worry about it. So listen, man, I'm a fan. You got plenty of fans out there. Please keep doing it. Keep believing, fighting the fight and everything. It was a pleasure to speak with you today.
Hey, likewise, a real pleasure and a privilege. And I thank you very much for thinking of me.
Jesus is a friend of mine. Jesus is my friend. Jesus is a friend of mine. I have a friend in Jesus. Jesus is a friend of mine. Jesus is my friend. Jesus is a friend of mine. He taught me how to live my life as it should be. He taught me how to turn my cheek when